Hello everybody, it's me, Jenny again, and I'm here in front of the camera today. Very exciting, I know. And for ages now I have been saying that I am going to film some sort of introduction video, some sort of getting to know you type thing. Unfortunately, I have been sort of racking my brains as to where to start, really. And I was sort of floundering about and not knowing what to do or where to go or how to start. So I looked to YouTube for inspiration, always a good place to start. And I found one of the older videos that I watched. It managed to get recommended to me again by the algorithms that seem to know far more than they really should. And I found this video that was answering a few sort of get to know you type questions. So this isn't a tag video or anything, but I felt like it was a good place to start. So I will link that video down in the description, see if you want to go and have a look. And I have the questions here in my trusty notebook because I can't remember them off the top of my head. So the questions were asked by somebody calling themselves Wild Silver Wolf. And the questions are thus. Tell us your journey to your path. That's number 1. Number 2 is, why is this particular path the one you follow? Number 3, how did you come to know this path was right for you? Number 4, how is the particular deity that you follow the one for you? Number 5, how did you come to know that they were right for you? Number 6, was it a long journey to this decision based on the above questions? And number 7, did you do the whole year and a day thing, or was it longer or shorter, etc. So, I thought that was a good place to start. I'm going to try and keep this video to sort of, under half an hour, because nobody really wants to listen to me ramble for longer than that, not even me. So, tell us your journey of your path, so your journey to your path. Well, I was brought up vaguely Christian, not particularly strict in any sense of the word. My parents did attend church when they were younger, and my mother still does occasionally attend church, but neither of them were hugely dogmatic about it. My father enjoys playing devil's advocate, shall we say. He likes asking the awkward questions. So there was quite a bit of balance in our household, I feel. However, I did go to a Church of England secondary school, and when I was younger we did attend church nearly every single Sunday, and I did go to Sunday school. But as far as I was concerned, or as far as it sort of filtered its way through into my little pre-adolescent brain, I felt that the stories that we were being told in church and in Sunday school were just stories. They were stories with a moral, like Aesop's fables. They're stories that are meant to teach you something and demonstrate values and demonstrate right and wrong and things like that. And that's how I took all of the stories from the Bible. And I was okay with that. My mother seemed to be okay with that. Nobody seemed to be disagreeing with me, so that's sort of how I was going about life. I then went to a Church of England secondary school, as I said, not because my parents particularly wanted me to go to a churchy school. It was just one of the schools in my area that I preferred and that I wanted to go to. It was my decision. They had a purple uniform, and I like purple, so maybe that played into the decision. So I went to this Church of England secondary school, and as part of it being a Church of England school, we had RE lessons. I think it was twice a week. Might just have been once a week. I'm not sure. But we had RE lessons, so religious education. And I suddenly started to understand how other people viewed the Bible and how other people viewed Christians, or how other people assumed you were when you labelled yourself as a Christian. And I realised that a lot of people were taking all of the stories from the Bible very literally, and that kind of weirded me out, because I was like, what? You think a dude literally walked on water? Or a dude literally came back to life after 3 days? Okay. Fair enough. That's not what I believe though, so maybe I'm not Christian. So I started to sort of distance myself from the whole Christianity idea at that point, and started looking into things that did interest me. We were taught about lots of other religions. We were often taught about the big three, because they were sort of part of the main curriculum, and they were always so very, very dull. And I much preferred to learn about other religions, like Hinduism or Buddhism, or, you know, some of the more Eastern religions like Shintoism. And I found those absolutely incredible because they were so different. And from my sort of research into them, and then my research into various other types of spirituality and spiritual philosophy, I found paganism. Or more specifically, I found Wicca, because it's the most obvious thing out and about from the realm of paganism, or at least it was when I was doing the research in the very early 2000s. So yeah, that's kind of how I came to find paganism and to find Wicca. I don't class myself as Wiccan anymore. It has been a sort of continuing onward journey, as it were. It's always a journey, really. I don't think I'll ever get to the end of it. I don't think I'll ever actually want to get to the end of it, because I really do believe that the journey is so much more important than the destination. Cliched as that might be. So I found Wicca, and I found some books and some very, very early online resources for Wicca and witchcraft. And I looked into that, and I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. I agreed with 90% of its principles, like, straight off the bat. I was like, yes, this is what I already think. This is what I already believe. There's a name for it. I was very pleased. And I did also, coming from a sort of Church of England school, there had been a bit of, you know, Christianity is the only good way kind of thing. Not hugely, it wasn't pushed or anything, it was just kind of presented as the norm. You know, not heteronormative, it's Christianormative. Is that a word? Maybe it is now. I did kind of like the idea of it being something other. You know, I was a teenager at the time, and this sort of otherness really rather attracted me, and I liked the idea that it was a little bit rebellious and a little bit naughty, maybe. However, my mother completely quashed my ideas of rebellion in the nicest possible way. I came out to her one day as a witch. I decided, right, this is what I'm going to be. Mother, I am now a witch, and I am going to practice Wicca, and I believe in a god and goddess, and ain't nothing you can do about it. And she responded with, oh darling, that's wonderful. Here's the spell book, and this is a lovely notebook that you can use as your first book of shadows. Which was incredibly incredibly sweet of her. But I was kind of a bit, Mama, you're ruining the rebellion. But, you know, it was definitely a better experience of coming out to your parents than a lot of people have, and for that I'm very, very grateful. But at the time I was a little disappointed that she wasn't more scandalised, because I was a teenager and I liked drama. So from there it's progressed onwards and upwards, and I've grown and continued to grow in paganism and in witchcraft to this very day, and I expect to for the rest of my life, really. So number 2, why is this particular path the one you follow? Oh, I'm going to have to put a name to myself now, aren't I? Darn it. So, the labels that I claim for myself are pagan witch. At times, I sometimes throw in shamanic pagan witch, because I feel that that is a better descriptor for my path right now. In the past, it has just been witch, or it has been Wiccan witch, or just pagan. In fact, that's quite often how I introduce myself. Hi, I'm Jenny. Nice to meet you. I'm pagan. So yeah, that's the label that I use for myself. And why is it the one that I use? Because I feel it's the one that best describes me, really. I am a witch, I practice witchcraft. I am pagan, and I kind of like the vagueness of the term pagan, because it allows me to grow and develop and change without actually having to change my label. Because the scope of just pagan is massive. It's huge. Am I a polytheist pagan? Am I a duotheist pagan? Am I a non-theist pagan? Who knows? I'm just pagan. So yes, I enjoy the sort of simplicity as well as the complexity that is the term pagan, or at least how I view the term pagan. Other views may vary. And that is how I feel. That is how I feel. It's the name that I have chosen for my path because I feel it is the one that describes it the best and describes me the best. And it's what I'm comfortable with right now. In the future, that might change, just as it has changed in the past. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, number 3. Number 3. How did you come to know this path was right for you? Kind of the same as the answer to number 2, unfortunately, because it is. You know, these questions are so difficult, you know, like, why is strawberry your favourite flavour of ice cream? Because I like it? Because it is? But I suppose I should, I don't know, find a better answer than that. Through a fair amount of trial and error, basically. That's how I came to know. I do believe that you should always be learning and growing and changing throughout your life. Not necessarily because there's anything wrong with beliefs you might have been taught, or beliefs that you grew up with, or the beliefs of your culture, or the beliefs of yourself. I just believe that self-exploration and questioning is so important to the development of who you are. You know, even if it leads you straight back to the place you were, at least then you are so much more sure of where you were. Because you've been out and seen other things and tried other things and learned other things, and you've still come back to where you are. So you're doubly sure that this is the place that is right for you. And like I said, I have continued to learn and grow and change, and this is the result. I'm always learning more. I'm not always actively seeking to change my views or to change my perspective on life or to shake up my spirituality, but I really do believe that continuing to learn is what it means to be human, really. That got profound. Moving on. So, number 4, why is your particular deity the one that you follow? And why is it the one for you? So, deities. Alright, so on to the question of deity. I do have a concept of deity. It's kind of a complicated deity view, I think. At least I find it complicated. It kind of gives me a headache when I think about it too hard. But it's something that I have developed over many, many years, and for many years I didn't know what I thought about deity. It was something that I had to ruminate on for literally years. And it's only really been in the past 2 or 3 years that I have come up with my current, what I think of as satisfactory answer to what deity is. But that really could be a video all in of itself, so maybe I will leave that there and just talk to you about the deities that I work with. Now, I work with quite a few different deities. I have relationships with a number of them in varying sort of levels of intimacy and closeness, and, you know, as you would with friends, really. But I am a dedicant of Ellen of the Ways, and again, this is relatively recent. It's about 4 or 5 years on now. It kind of happened all at once, but also very slowly and gradually over time. This video is just full of contradictions. It's great. I am a dedicant of Ellen of the Ways. She is a antlered goddess, a deer goddess of the British Isles, and of the sort of northern forests. Again, I could do an entire video series on her, and maybe I will at some point in the future. I do have other deities, like I said, that I have close relationships with. So Canunos and Herne have been quite close in our relationships, working with them and building relationships with them and understanding their energies and how they sort of influence my life. I've also had some working relationships with Lilith and with the Morrigan. And I've also had sort of passing relationships with a few other deities as well. Sometimes I find that happens, that you will come into contact with a deity for just a few months, and then that's it, you don't hear from them for ages. I've had a few, but my primary deity who I am dedicated to, not that you have to be dedicated to one, but the one that I am dedicated to, is Ellen of the Ways. Number 5. How did you come to know that that deity was right for you? This is kind of an amusing story. So when I first started exploring paganism, exploring Wicca, it was always about, all the books talked about a god and a goddess. Some of them just spoke about them in the sort of abstract divine feminine, divine masculine concept, and some of them talked about them as named individuals. And a few of the books that I was sort of following were mentioning sort of matron and patron deities. And Herne and Canunos came through very strongly, very quickly, as to sort of who my male deities were, in the sort of the god position. However, the goddess was a little bit more difficult, a little bit more elusive, possibly because, having grown up vaguely Christian, I was already familiar with the concept of some sort of male deity, if not necessarily in the sort of form of the divine masculine, just a male deity, a god. So I was already familiar with that concept. The concept of the divine feminine, or a goddess, was a little bit more sort of foreign, a little bit more abstract. So it did take a little while for anything to come through, really. So for quite a while I was just going through the motions, really, because this is what the book said. But when I did eventually have this sort of divine feminine presence come through, who I sort of was trying to build a relationship with, I didn't know who they were for a very long time. They always presented themselves in a natural setting, so in the forests, in the woods. That was where I felt closest to them, to this divine feminine energy. And they often had sort of very woodsy symbolism coming through, so there was a lot of deer around and about. So I did a little bit of research into, who were the goddesses of nature, of the wild places, of deer, and I found Artemis, because she's pretty easy to find. She's around in a lot of mythology and in the history books and things. And I asked this feminine energy, "Are you Artemis?" And I got back a no. Nice try, but no. So I went, okay, who else might it be? And did a little bit more digging and came to Diana. It's not too far of a hop, skip and a jump from Artemis to Diana, really. And again, I went, is this who you are? Are you Diana? And again, I got a no. Nice try, but no. And it went on that way for many years, and I just went back to calling her goddess. And that was fine. We could build up a relationship, and it was all good. And I had these sort of different beings, entities, divinities come through in a sort of very strong manner. But it wasn't this initial divine feminine that I had contact with. She was still around. She was very much part of my life and a part of my practice. I just didn't have a name for her yet. And then I was doing a little bit of research into some British deities. I was looking more into British and European deities that weren't quite as sort of Greco-Romano heavy. I was looking into some of the sort of maybe earlier ones, into maybe the Celtic things and the sort of pre-Roman British spiritualities and goddesses and things. And I found a list on a website just of goddess names that were known in Britain or in the British Isles. And there was lots. There was, Bridget and Brigantia and Danu, Epona, Rhiannon, lots of the ones that are relatively well known, and there was sort of just their name and a little bit about them. And then partway down this list, I found the name Ellen. And it was like lightning struck. It was sort of, oh my god, that is it. And right in that moment, I sort of reached out and asked, "Are you Ellen? Is this your name?" And she went, "Took you long enough. Yeah, hello." And it went from there. So I've had this relationship with this green, naturey, dear goddess for a very, very long time, but it's really only in the past sort of 4 or 5 years that I've finally had a name for her, and finally managed to find other people who know who she is and work with her and have relationships with her, and it has just been a fantastic journey from that point onwards. And it was such a, that divine inspiration moment of, haha, which I found very interesting. And it hasn't really happened with anybody else, but might in the future. You never know. Alright, so on to number 6. Was it a long journey to this decision based on the above? Well, having had you just sit through the above, you could probably say yes. It has been a long journey, but like I said earlier, that's kind of the point. So, okay, let's think about this. How many years? Let's quantify this. So, it was probably about a 7-year journey. 7 years to the point where I found Ellen, and then it's been sort of five years from there, so quite a few years. But I feel that the journey to finding paganism and finding my path and finding who I am, although it is ongoing, I feel it didn't take me very long. I did find it when I was in my mid to late teens. And I feel that's pretty early on to decide on your spirituality and who you are. There are some people who maybe don't have that sort of, that journey and that sort of introspection until they're maybe in their 50s, maybe even later in life. So I feel that in my first couple of decades on this planet, it wasn't that long, but since then it has been a very long journey that is my life, basically. But it's definitely not a bad thing that it's been a long journey. It's been long and eventful, and that's great. I wouldn't want it to be short and boring. So, last question, you'll be very pleased to hear. Last question. Did you do the year and a day thing? Was it longer or shorter, etc.? Yes and no. I declared myself to be Wiccan and a witch pretty early on. Pretty sort of only possibly after a couple of months about finding out what Wicca is and what witchcraft is and getting my first couple of books. I was very enthusiastic and very energized to sort of dive in straight away. So yes, I did call myself Wiccan very quickly, probably quicker than I should have. But I feel that might be a valid way of exploring, to really throw yourself in, jump in at the deep end as it were, and decide this is who I am, this is what I'm going to be. If after a few years you've done lots and lots of research and you've lived it and you've breathed it and you've slept it, and you realise actually maybe that's not right for me, or I've learned more so now I move on, then that's a way of being. That's a way that you can experience life, and it's kind of a way that I've experienced life. um, so yes, I did jump in and start calling myself Wiccan straight away. I then did try to do the sort of year in a day thing. However, being a teenager at the time and having limited resources of my own, I couldn't find a teacher. There weren't any covens or open circles or anything like that in the area that I was in that would have accepted somebody who was sort of 14, 15. And that's entirely understandable. I firmly believe that that sort of thing should be a sort of post-18 thing. So I did my own little research sort of on my own, but it wasn't anything particularly formal. There are some books that you can work through that are sort of year in a day workbooks, as it were. I didn't have any of those. I didn't really work through it. I certainly didn't do something every single day, but I started observing the sort of the wheel of the year and started trying to do things for the Sabbats and the celebrations. For a few months on the trot, I did manage to do a full moon ceremony and a full moon ritual every single full moon, which was quite impressive. But being in school and being in your teenage years, it's not the most conducive thing to then be diverting your attention, splitting your attention between your sort of academic studies and your spiritual studies. That way lies burnout and confusion. So I guess it was longer than a year and a day, but it was never anything formal. I've never had any formal training from a circle or a coven. I have, in the intervening years from then till now, I've had friends who are more experienced than me who have taught me things. I've had some fantastic teachers. It was never anything sort of official. I haven't paid for any sort of ongoing ritual education, as it were. We just had little meetups over cups of tea. We'd bake each other's cakes, and I would learn from them, and I'd share my knowledge of things. So I would share sort of some of my knowledge of crafts, and they would teach me about soul retrieval, as you do on a Wednesday afternoon. And I've just been constantly learning, and again, I really do believe that that is how we should all be. You should always be learning about something. You can't be learning about everything all the time, every day. But there's always something else that you can dive deeper into, that you can, expand your knowledge on. So at the moment, I am attempting to teach myself more about tarot and things like that. Because that's not something I know a whole deal about at the moment. And in the past it has been herbalism and herbal lore and things like that. And in the future it might be scrying or dowsing or some other sort of witchcraft. So in part it was less than a year and a day before I decided to call myself Wiccan and a witch. And in part it's been longer than that. It's been many, many years and many days of learning from others and from other resources and teaching myself all different kinds of aspects of paganism and witchcraft and spirituality. And I have loved it. I wouldn't be any other way. Thank you ever so much for watching. If you have made it to the end of this video, congratulations! Round of applause to you. I hope it wasn't too boring, and I hope it has meant that you've gotten to know me a little bit better, and that we can become closer as a community and closer friends. So if you have got any answers to these questions, you can leave them down in the comments. Let us know what was your journey to your particular path. What labels do you claim for yourself? And what would you call yourself if somebody asked you? Thank you ever so much for watching. Hope you've enjoyed it. Blessed be, and I'll see you next time.